The Philadelphia Eagles received some big news around Landon Dickerson this evening. The Eagles left guard, the three-time Pro Bowler who hurt his meniscus during a public practice down at Lincoln Financial Field, has received a positive update. And we'll be getting to that in today's stream, so make sure you stick around for all of the latest updates. But what a week it has been for the Eagles. We have seen a big preseason game against the Bengals where none other than Tanner McKee stole the spotlight. We've seen some ups and downs in terms of the roster battle and so much more as well. So there's only one place to start, and that is with Landon Dickerson. Though we'll get to the roster projections, maybe some risers and fallers after another week of grueling and intense training camp. But for now, all eyes remain on Landon Dickerson. So Dickerson suffered the injury at Lincoln Financial Field not too long ago, Sunday evening, and it was a big scare. Like, you never want to see any player go down with an injury in a practice, but for Dickerson, especially for someone as vital to this offensive line as him, it just doesn't bode well. And we've said all offseason that depth at the offensive guard position is light, because behind Dickerson, it is just really Matt Pryor, the likes of Trevor Keegan, some rookies, some unproven talent, and there's not a lot to lean on in terms of a pinch scenario, at least proven depth-wise. Like, you can maybe look at someone like Kenyon Green if you can swing him over to that side, but depth has been light. So the big thing was, how severe is this injury? Do the Eagles need to go shopping for a guard? Can they sit on their hands for a minute and wait for this MRI to come back? They did the latter. And what we saw was Landon Dickerson end up only missing potentially, I'd say, 1 or 2 games of the season. So the goal is that he will be back by September 4th, which means he would be back, of course, in time for that game against the Dallas Cowboys, which is absolutely huge for this Eagles team. Now, I will go on record and say that, like, Landon Dickerson just is a fighter. Like, we all remember some of the stuff he's fought through. Like, he will not go down without a fight. And I personally wouldn't want to be the doctor telling him that he's not going to compete or that he's not going to be starting week 1. And he reminds me a lot of a Jason Kelsey or a Lane Johnson in that regard. Like, it would take a lot to get him off the field. But the fact that the Eagles have examined the options and they believe that they can get him back, hopefully up to speed by September 4th, is a huge sigh of relief. It is a huge sigh of relief. And even if they can't and they want to be careful and they wait 2 or 3 weeks, could they beat the Cowboys without Landon Dickerson? I think they most likely could. You can lean on someone like Matt Pryor, for instance, who's had over 1,000 NFL snaps to his name. He's been on this team before. He's a swing guard. He's played a little bit of everywhere. Did okay with the Bears. I think is muted for some reason. Not really sure what happened there. But yeah, it's just a huge sigh of relief. I think above anything else to know that Dickerson will be back in time for the regular season, all being well. Now, this, of course, all depends on the severity of the injury. I would assume by that timeline, you're looking at 4 to 5 weeks. Now, I'm no mathematician, but a meniscus tear, even at a basic level, if you just Google it, which is never a good thing, it's like self-diagnosing, an illness and finding out you've got 2 weeks left to live when all you've done is had a headache. But you know what I mean? Like 6 to 12 weeks, rough recovery for a partial tear. So it should, in theory, be less than that, which is, again, a massive sigh of relief. So to know that Dickerson's okay, to know he should be on this Eagles team in week 1 or September 4th against the Cowboys is absolutely brilliant. And just, again, I think we can all wipe the sweat from our foreheads. Duck and Zach, nice to see you in the chat. Duck says there's plenty of depth on the offensive line. Not having him is painful, but I'd think that letting him heal for a full 6 weeks is fine. And I think I'm kind of okay with that. Like, again, could you lean on Matt Pryor for a couple of spot starts? I think you could. I mean, if it was me, I would happily ride Trevor Keegan and see if he can do something with that opportunity, because that's how Stoughton University has worked, right? If you remember how Matt Pryor got his exposure with the Eagles in the first place, if you look at Halapoulivaati Vaitai, who was in that same class as Pryor, both of those guys ended up being depth pieces. Suoro Peta was another one. Players that can just come up, build, develop, and then hold their own. And what the Eagles do better than anyone, I think, is if they do have a weak spot, especially on the offensive line, is nullify that as best they can through the surrounding players. So you remember when Big V was first thrown in during that 2017 run, when Matt Pryor was first thrown in during that 2017 run. The play of Jason Kelsey, the play of Peters, I think before he got injured, just having those guys around and the strength on the other side of the line really did help, like, make you feel like those guys weren't really there, which for an offensive lineman is the best compliment you can have, right? Like, they're not Jamon Brown level. They're not getting their quarterback sacked or running into them or just readjusting their gloves mid-snap. These are players that if you just watch the game at face value on TV, you won't notice them because the Eagles do such a good job of just compensating errors, compensating weaknesses, and making them comfortable to compete and to do well in their scheme, which is all a full credit to Jeff Stoutland, which is what Michael Rudolph says there. Nice to see you, Michael. Love the profile picture. That could be a Super Bowl picture, or is that taken after the Super Bowl? As a very happy man. Don't forget, we have the magician coach, Jeff Stoutland. Zach says, bring Kelce out of retirement for a game. Move Jurgens to guard. Sounds like the Eagles might need to trade for Colton. We'll leave that one. So I don't think they do. They haven't got to do anything. Again, like, you can go 2-3 games without Dickerson. Yes, he's a huge part of that offensive line. But also, I would say if this was 2 years ago, right? Like, if this was Dickerson's first Pro Bowl year with the Eagles, and it was Miles Sanders, and it was someone else, or like Kenny Gainwell, would it be an issue? Like, yeah, probably. You've also got one of the best running back, if not the best running back in football, certainly one of the best one cutbacks in football, that can just make a decision, read a gap, just commit to it and turn his head and go downhill and be so elusive to slip through. So when you've got someone like Saquon, I mean, if you look at what Saquon did with the Giants, and he had no starters. He had 5 offensive linemen that were basically some of the viewers in this chat. And you boys did a great job blocking. Don't get me wrong. You were fantastic. But for an NFL level, not quite the same. So if Saquon can be... Saquon at the Giants was still above most backs in the NFL, you know, without the injuries. He was still firing at a great clip in terms of yards per carry. So you lose one piece for 1 game, 2 games, I think they'll be absolutely fine. Certainly no need to hit the panic button there. But it was a Super Bowl picture. Love that. I might just pin that there for a minute just so we can all take in the Super Bowl love. The preseason game shows us what we have in Trot Jr. He's a good player who have a nice long career. All right, let's get into preseason stuff because I don't want to go around in circles and talk Landon Dickerson all night long. But we will start with Jeremiah Trotter. So for anyone that has been in this stream for a considerable amount of time, since the Eagles drafted Trotter, I wasn't that high on him when they took him because I felt that people were massively overvaluing him when he was being mentioned in second-round conversations. My biggest gripe with his play wasn't his ability to hit hard and emulate his father, wasn't his ability to click and close, wasn't his ability to make plays on the ball or be around the football. It was simply that it took him a little bit too long to make decisions. And in college, with the playbooks being so wide, he'd often end up stuck in the mud. Now, when he fired and when he made a decision, he was arguably a second-round pick. If you were to just play his career in college and take the first 3 seconds out and watch him in motion, you would think he is a top player coming out of college. It was that first 4 or 5 seconds where he'd be stuck in the mud, lose an ankle, maybe get roped in by a quarterback, something like that. What we saw in that preseason game alone, and I think this is a testament to the experience he had during the last regular season that we saw with the Eagles when they'd be up by so much they could throw Trotter in certain packages. He was getting defensive looks. I think that's helped slow the game down for him. And I think having a linebacker coach that, you know, not many people were familiar with him before he joined the Eagles, turned Zach Bourne into an all-pro, you know, helped Nakobe Dean put up a great year before the injury, helped what was once a linebacker position laughed at by most NFL teams become one of the most widely respected in the space of 1 year. And now you're training with Jahad Campbell on a daily basis. Now you're working with Zach Bourne again. I think it's easy to see how Jeremiah Trotter has developed. And being away from that spotlight, I think, has helped him so much. I think if he'd have come in, and I said it back then, as a first-round, second-round, third-round pick, with the expectation and the weight of his father's name to be thrust into what would have been a starting, if not depth role instantly, wouldn't have been what he needed. I think now when we look at that one preseason game alone, looks like a totally different player. He's so reactive. Like, he's so ahead of the game. He's so quick now to make decisions. And maybe it was just a confidence thing. But to me, watching him play that preseason game, and this isn't hyperbolic, okay? It was the same year 1 to year 2 development curve. The last time I genuinely felt I saw it was Jordan Mailata. And look, this is someone that, again, watches tape, is a fiend for preseason games. there are a lot of rookies that come in and they'll be all right year one, they'll be all right year two, or like Tanner McKee, good year one, good year two. Like nothing really changed for Tanner McKee this week, right? Other than the fact that he was Tanner McKee. He made good decisions, was confident with the ball. I will glaze him later for it. But he was good. We knew he was good. It wasn't a shock. The last player I can genuinely think of that made me just stop and go, oh, he's got something. Like he has added some weapons to his arsenal was Jordan Mailata in terms of a steep curve. And I mean that in the greatest of respects. I think that is such a big win for Jeremiah Trotter. And who it doesn't help, unfortunately, is Nakobe Dean, who currently on the PUP, trying to come back from an injury, contract year. They've just drafted Jahad Campbell. They're not really in a good spot now to pay Nakobe, knowing they've got to pay Jordan Davis, knowing they've, again, potentially, they've got to pay Nolan Smith. Jalen Carter's not far away. It's tough. Like, I don't think they're going to keep Nakobe. And if you can get Jeremiah Trotter to make that kind of stride. Now, admittedly, it's one game. It's been one game of football. It's preseason. We haven't seen enough yet. But the training camp reports have been good. The preseason game, I think, was brilliant. And if he can sustain that into the regular season, we don't know how much, exposure he's going to get, because realistically, he's going to be competing for snaps with Jahad unless he ends up playing on that weak side, which I don't think is where they want him. They kind of keep ball on one side. They very rarely now deploy 3 linebackers. So I think it would be that, rotational role behind Jahad Campbell, and that would knock Nakobe Dean down. Because if you're going to bring in another linebacker and you want a third linebacker, to me, the obvious option is Jalix Hunt, because of how versatile he is, because of how quick and agile he is. He can do so much from having his, a 3-point stance to dropping back into coverage. I think he's exceptional. So Nakobe, I don't think, would fill that role very well. Trot is best in the middle as a Mike. Jahad Campbell looks like he's going to be moved around a bit. So maybe if we see him down with his hand in the dirt with the edge rushes, you see Trot come in. He's going to benefit from those snaps. But I think if you were to name a big winner from that first preseason game, it kind of has to be, right? Like there was no one to me outside of Tanner McKee that looked as good as Jeremiah Trotter did. Now, again, I'm buzzing for him. I really hope that his career can kind of kick on and he can find some form and start contributing defensively in the regular season. It wouldn't shock me at all if we saw a Nolan Smith sort of career arc where he started a bit slow and then he just get that one first play. Like I feel like Nolan Smith after that first sack was a totally different player. Like the celebration of that first sack, if you can find it on YouTube and go and watch it, it didn't feel like a celebration. It wasn't like a throwing a hammer down or a flex. It was almost like a weight off the shoulders, like he's free, like he's done it and he can just shed that weight and start working. And once that was done, I think he just turned into an absolute menace. And we've not really looked back since. So I can see that same thing happening here for Jeremiah Trotter. I think he has got a lot of upside. And the main gripe that I had on him has seemingly, for one preseason game at least, evaporated, which is good to see. Michael says, Saquon had no O-line in New York like Barry didn't in Detroit, and both made amazing things happen. Completely agree. Which, again, I think is why that even if they're without Landon for 1 to 2 to 3 weeks at a push, if they want him fully healthy, you don't want to risk re-aggravating that injury, then they'll be fine. I think the Eagles will be fine. And Saquon also, not to constantly compare it back to Miles Sanders, but he's so much better in pass protection. Now, it doesn't say much. I think I was better in pass protection than Miles Sanders, but it's night and day. It is absolutely night and day. And that will help a lot when it comes to just buying Jalen that extra couple of seconds that you might otherwise lose, if it was another back there. So they'll be fine. But I think the main takeaway is that Landon is okay. He's going to be fine. It's a minor procedure. He'll be back for the regular season. And the dream stays alive, right? That dream of a repeat stays alive because he's so important to that offensive front. And just knowing that he's going to be back and kick in and ready to go around the start of the regular season is absolutely brilliant. Duck says here he'll be shocked if Sidney Brown is on the 53. He's going into his 3rd season and hasn't really learned anything. Do you know what? I agree. And it hurts to say it because I was a big Sidney Brown guy. And it feels like the Eagles just haven't really been able to draft reliable safeties, right? Like you can go back to Kayvon Wallace and that was the same thing, right? When he came out of Clemson and kind of got the nod from Brian Dawkins at being this homing missile, and it was the same issues, never got the exposure, yada, yada, yada. The only exception, of course, is Reed Blankenship. He was undrafted out of Middle Tennessee, and you end up with a very different player. But they've not drafted safeties well. And in a position now where it is going to be a weak link, I think they've got to make a decision. I think they really now have to decide, do you go, all right, let's go all in on moving Cooper DeJean up to the slot in certain packages, and we can run maybe Mac McWilliams in the nickel, or you can run, whether it's Parry Nickerson, whether it's Eli Ricks, whoever in the nickel, or do you trust Drew McCouber? And if you don't trust Drew McCouber, now do you go out and look at, I hate to say it, Justin Simmons? I know that man has been linked with the Eagles, I think, more time than the name Philadelphia. But is it time that you look at a veteran of that stature, of that experience, to tide them over? Because you don't need a miracle worker, you just don't need a liability. And realistically, that's the one spot. It's the one spot on defense. Now, in theory, it works out all right. I would rather the weakness be there than in Reed's spot, because there's that free roaming safety over the back. If you've got really bad coverage issues and passes being thrown over the top and being caught out and biting underneath on, these kind of cover one looks, that sort of thing, like that's far more concerning. And we saw that a lot with Jim Schwartz. I think when Rodney McLeod left, there was that almost weird transition period. But I also think that realistically, if you've got a safety who's primarily more of a box safety than he is a free range safety, right? Like if you compare what Sidney Brown does to what Reed Blankenship does, they just are two different roles. And I'd much rather have someone where you could potentially move Jahad Campbell up a little bit, a few steps back into coverage, and just give him an extra hook or something to work with. You could potentially look at one of the extra defensive backs that you have and see what you can do with them. Like there's options that they have there right now. And as much as they could go out and they could, go and grab a player like Justin Simmons, you've just drafted a second round safety. You've got to give him the shot first. He has to earn it, but you've got to give him the shot. If he can't, that's the issue. But I completely agree. I mean, Sidney Brown is like the opposite of Trotter. Like Trotter had one clear weakness to me, and for whatever that's worth. But when he was drafted, you look at it now, it's at least in that one game sample, it's not there. Sidney Brown has been Sidney Brown for 3 years. You're completely right. Like he just hits like Jalen Mills, but if Jalen Mills was listening to Motorhead constantly, like he's quicker and more nimble and more agile, but it's too erratic. It's too erratic. And when you're hitting guys the way he's hitting them, you either end in plays at near injury, like we saw on Thursday night, or you end in plays that end up jeopardizing your team from bad angles. Like he doesn't seem to have that slowdown. It's all in on, it's boom or bust. Every single tackle is boom or bust. And eventually that's going to haunt him. And I hope he can get it figured out, but doesn't seem to be that way. Michael says, I think 10 years ago, our linebacker room was met, and now we have a problem with trying to figure out who will be here in the future. Completely agree. It's nuts. I mean, when you go back and look at the likes of Nate Gary, and look, I love Alex Singleton, half for personal reasons, because he just was a stand-up guy, and from what I've been able to learn about him off the field and the way he carries himself, I just love him to bits. I think he's such a great guy. But you go from him and Nate Gary and TJ Edwards, who were like your bottom of the barrel scraping, trying to find value linebacker, to Jeremiah Trotter, who could really excel and his development could really spike, to Jahad Campbell, who they somehow got at the end of the first round, to Zach Bourne, who is now a bona fide all-pro, to Nakobe Dean, who, before injury, and even if he comes back, you've got a problem, like you said, Mike, right, of how you get him on the field. It's nuts. It's an insane turnaround. It really, really is. Doug brings up a point, though, and I was wondering when we were going to get to this. So let's dive in. Let's rip the Band-Aid off, because one of the, I would say, most disappointing elements of that preseason game against Cincinnati was the cornerback room. Outside of Eli Ricks, I want to give Eli Ricks his flowers. Yes, it was against lesser talent. Eli Ricks was the best cornerback on that field that night. By far. Absolutely brilliant. So I don't know. It's hard to get into. It's really hard to get into. I'm a big Keely Ringo guy, right? I think that's no surprise to anyone that's been watching these streams for a while. I'm a big Keely Ringo fan. It's difficult, I think, to gauge both of their performances contextually, because Ringo was lined up against Jamar Chase, who we won't really see him lined up against that. Like, how many receiver rooms in the NFL have a 1-2 tandem as good as the Eagles, where if it's not A.J. Brown, it's Devontae Smith? Because outside of maybe Minnesota, like, it's not many. It's not many. You have good receivers, but like it's rare that Ringo will be on a number one. So that was a good grading scale. Like if nothing else, that was a really good grading scale. Because you're all right, how high is that ceiling? If Quignon goes down, is Ringo ready to be CB2? The answer, categorically not. I think, yeah. Now, he could just have a bad game. Again, one game sample. Same with Trot. I don't want to get too high on him. Don't want to get too low on Ringo. But it was bad. And Jamar Chase, I think, very much brought him back down to earth, very much humbled him. Now, what was more concerning for me was Adoree Jackson going up against the likes of Chase Brown, going up against, again, lesser receivers, really struggling, right? Really, really struggling. And Jackson, the thing is, like, Ringo didn't get cooked. He just got beat, right? Jackson wasn't getting beat as much as he was beating himself. Like, there were a few plays on out routes and curls where he was so far behind the ball, he had no hope of coming back for a tackle, and the receiver could just get to the sideline. There was too many of those for a receiver of that stature, because that's who you're looking at for Adoree Jackson. Is like those, wide receivers 2, 3, 4. Like, that's who you're going to be lining up against. Ringo didn't have that opportunity very much. He was against Jamar Chase, so I'm willing to sort of let him off the hook. Not a lot. It's like, instead of giving him a 2 out of 10, we'll give him like a 2.5 to 3. Adoree Jackson, to me, was far more concerning, because this is a veteran who has been a starter in the league near enough since he came in, has started for multiple teams, has seen every shape and size and skill set of receiver that there is, and still was making like basic fundamental errors. Was Ringo making basic fundamental errors? I don't think so. Like, he was there or thereabouts in coverage. He wasn't far away the better receiver one. Adoree Jackson, to me, looked out of place. Like, he was just being picked at. The best example I can give, right, as a comparison, is, do you remember when Jim Schwartz was in Philly, right, and there was all this noise about corners playing off coverage? Because especially the Giants were a pain in the ass for this, because everyone would say the Eagles would obliterate the Giants, and then it's like, well, they won't, because you just give them 8 yards of play every time, and the quarterback's not confident enough to go downfield, so they just sprinkle it to the outs, right? And all you saw was wide receivers like Sterling Shepard going off, right? Like, just after Odell. You could have bums in that Giants team, and they'd be lining up against Ronald Darby. I mean, anyone looked good against Ronald Darby, but it's just, you run to the corner, you turn right, you get the reception. It was just a leverage play, timing throws. They just did it, dinked and dunked all day down the field and got themselves into the game. Adoree Jackson looked like that while not giving them that leverage. That concerns me. That's a player that he looked stiff in transition, like he wasn't flipping his hips very well. He wasn't moving with the receivers very well. Was very rarely in the hip pocket of receivers to make a play on the ball. And that's what I mean. Ringo would get beat at the line. Ringo would struggle in coverage at times, but he'd be there or thereabouts. It's just the player was infinitely better. We're talking about one of the top receivers in football. Adoree Jackson, if that was against Jamar Chase, I feel like would have got absolutely obliterated. And if I'm wrong, and if you think maybe I'm giving Ringo too much credit or I'm being too hard on Adoree, please let me know in the comments. To me, I don't see it that way. I think Adoree was by far the more concerning player of the two. Ringo, you knew he would maybe struggle against Jamar Chase. The more interesting one is going to be the Browns joint practices. I think you can probably take more from a joint practice than you can from a preseason game, right? Because it's more competitive. The reps are designed sometimes to be one-on-one. A lot of the times they also favor the offense, so the corners are naturally at a disadvantage. So if they make a play, it's infinitely more impressive. I think you're going to get way more value out of that from what we see from reporters and cameras and basic consensus in those joint practices than we will in the preseason game. Having said that, if I was to say who's going to start CB2 opposite Quignon Mitchell, it just would be Ringo at the minute. And that's not a high vote of confidence, Ringo, but it's a damn sight better than Adoree Jackson, who just looked like he's just got out of bed and he needed a stretch and he hasn't limbered up and he's a little bit tight. And that was kind of how it looked to me. So they didn't look good, Duck. You're absolutely right. Neither player looked good in that game. I think, again, Ringo was the better of the two, but that is like saying, I don't know, a watery egg is better than it's a bad analogy, just like the cornerbacks. We'll move on. What do we have in Bennett? I've not seen him play, nor have heard anything from him from camp. I'll be honest, and I won't lie, I've not watched much tape on him. I was vaguely familiar with the name. Didn't see anything in the preseason that stood out. So, again, I guess you can make of that what you will. We will do a film room, though, on Wednesday, right? So, Wednesday night, we'll do a film room. We'll go into his tape and we'll see what he brings. So, we'll do that. So, Wednesday night, if you are intrigued about Jacorian Bennett and where he fits in this Eagles defense and if he's good enough to potentially displace Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson, we'll do it Wednesday, 6 p.m. here on the channel. A quick apology as well, just while we've got a minute here, for there being no streams last week. It was just, again, another couple of very chaotic weeks. I had a wedding, I had a funeral. It was very all up in the air and over the gap. So happy to be back, watch the preseason game and slotted that in on my Saturday. And yeah, definitely some takeaways from it. I am getting to all your comments, so don't worry. I promise I'm not missing them. We've just had a flurry while I've been rambling. Duck says, second and third team offensive line looks a little weak against the Bengals first team Bengals first team offensive line, but look decent against second and third team. I think I might have confused myself there, but I think I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think a lot of eyes were on guys like Miles Hinton, Drew Kendall, guys like that. There were a few people that, I don't know, people wanted to really get some validation from. I think especially now after that Landon Dickerson injury, even though it is minor and he's okay and he should be back for week 1, there was certainly a lot of focus on those depth pieces. I don't know. I think it was an okay night. They certainly started better than they finished, which is to be expected with preseason outings. But yeah, there are a couple of players that looked all right. I thought Miles Hinton was okay. Thought he had some flashes, some otherwise poor moments. But it is what it is. We'll see. I think a lot of people on that offensive line are very young. We're talking like baby Suro Peta, Nate Herbig level players, right? Where they haven't proven themselves yet. They're year 1, year 2, year 3, haven't had an opportunity, and they just need to get more snaps, more experience under their belt. So stuff like this is really good for them. And we'll just see how they do against the Browns and in those joint practices. McCullum and Blankenship isn't as physically talented as Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but they are more consistent. Yeah, I mean, McCullum's another option. I think to me, McCullum would be the guy that you have in just behind Makuba for now. Like you give the opportunity to your second round pick, it doesn't work. You've got a proven, at least special teamer commodity there that can help you out. Bird Brain is in, so I didn't realize you were streaming. Neither did I, to be honest with you. Again, it's just been a very manic couple of weeks, but I can't stay away from you guys for too long. I'll start listening to Taylor Swift and crying a little bit. Nick, nice to see you, my friend. Haven't heard from you in a little while. I hope you're all well. A former PSN man himself. Agree with your points on Trott Jr. and Sidney Brown. Who do I think, if he's on the roster now, is the edge rusher who becomes the top third rotational piece behind Hunt and Nolan Smith? Good seeing you. Good to see you too. Probably would be Josh Uche. I think it would be. Like, just by process of elimination, that Uche has been the player that has been the more consistent. Like, Azeez has been closer to the roster bubble than he has been a starting role, which is surprising. Because of the two players to come in, Ojulari had the more buzz from the fan base, I would say. Just by, the reaction on social media, I think Ojulari was met with a lot of adoration because of, the big season that he had with the Giants. Uche, very different edge rusher, very different team he come from, obviously, with the Patriots. I think you just would have to give it to him, I think, in the minute. Like, for me, you've got Nolan Smith, Jalix Hunt, Uche, and then Ojulari fourth. And then below that, depends how creative you want to get. It really does. Do you want to start lining Jihad down there? Do you want to maybe start looking at an APR? Do you want to look at Patrick Johnson, who looked all right there for a minute in preseason? I don't know. There's a couple of other names as well, but I think those would be the three for now. Oh my God, a stream. We've been streaming the whole time. We haven't. I've had 2 weeks off by accident. But yeah, we have been streaming all off season, mate. I'm not going anywhere. It wouldn't be a football season without some wholesome J-Fizz content, man. Nice to see you back. But yeah, we are back. Preseason is rolling. Training camp is rolling. And the Eagles are mostly healthy, which is the main thing to take away. Bennett did mix in with the ones on Sunday at the practice. Was anyone at the practice? And could they tell me if Bennett did okay? We might have just had our answer to that there. Sorry, Michael said, not sure if Bennett was the cornerback that had the pre-snap pick 6 last year for the Raiders, but if he has good instincts and pre-snap reads. Well, we'll find out, Mike. We will find out on Wednesday. All right, we'll come back here 6 o'clock. We'll get out the game film and we'll do some digging on what the team are getting. But now you've said that, like, my eyebrows have perked just that little bit. The rookie tackles struggled greatly on Thursday. Okay. So while we get into that, then, Bird Brain, drop me your takeaways. All right, you take my seat for a minute. I'm going to hop off and make a cup of tea. I'm not. But give me your takeaways from practice, because I missed all of it because, again, just non-stop. Like, wedding, funeral, 3 more, it would have been a movie. Let me know what your takeaways were, because I know a few people that went and it has been different viewpoints on certain things. Obviously, the Landon Dickerson injury was a big one. Jahad Campbell was a big talking point as well, as he naturally would be. What else did you see down there? I didn't notice Bennett target much, but I was drooling over Quignon. That can be respected. I mean, he just is a corner that draws the eyes, isn't he? And look, I'm happy to sit here today and say that last year I was, pounding the table for Terry on Arnold over Quignon Mitchell because I liked the upside more. But as a player that has just come in and developed and immediately hit a very high ceiling, Quignon has exceeded all expectations. And I thought, to me, Quignon was the better floor player. Arnold was the better ceiling player. We'll see how that goes long term. But in a dream scenario, they're both multiple-time Pro Bowlers. And yeah, Quignon just does that. A very, very rare trait, doesn't he? Where it doesn't matter who's lining up against him. And I think, again, part of being with this Eagles team and working with AJ and Smitty so much, he just doesn't fear anyone. He's going to fight regardless. He's going to put his hand into a catch point. He's going to make a hit. He's a great player, and he's so fun to watch. He also says that Moro Ojomo is a demon in the making. I like that. I think he might be one of the Eagles' most quiet success stories, I think, over the last 3 to 5 years. And a team where, you've seen so many high-profile players come and perform. From veterans like Slay and CJ GJ to rookies and draft picks, whether it's Landon Dickerson himself, Cam Jurgens, Jalen Carter, Quignon Mitchell, like all of these guys who have just hit the ground running. For Moro Ojomo to come in and just slowly just build this stature in the team, to now be at a point where arguably he's young question DT3? Is that too far to say? Is that too early to say? I don't think so. I think you'd put him ahead of Ty Robinson, certainly. And Ty Robinson had a little flash in the preseason, and that was great. But I think that Ojomo just has that about him. I really think that he's just developed into a very reliable defensive tackle who just has that mean streak. And it's one of those most cliche things that you hear all the time, right? Where, you go, defensive tackles, but he's got a nasty streak. He's got a mean streak. And then you watch the play and you're like, you can't really see what they mean. But the way that Ojomo is so violent with his hands and he's so aggressive, like if the first move doesn't work, he's just not asked. He's just wriggling around like a fish in a net and he's got to escape at some point. I think that kind of mentality has benefited him so much. And yeah, he's developed incredibly well. Again, learning from guys like Jalen Carter has probably expedited that development. But great young player, really, really solid. And someone that I hope we see continue to grow and get opportunities and come up with a couple of sacks this year and make his impact on the team. Because to lose Milton Williams is a pretty significant loss given the way that he developed with this Eagles team. And I think Ojomo not necessarily can follow that bar for bar, but he's done it under the radar, right? Like he's just grown and become more reliable and more steady, and it's great to see. D-line wreaked havoc with blitzing linebackers. Him and Carter is an under-discussed duo. I'm all for it. I think, like, especially with Jordan Davis's contract, there could well be a scenario we don't see Davis much. Like, after this season, next season, like, the Eagles are going to have to make some tough decisions. Like, unless they can find a way to keep Davis, Carter, Smith, you can start looking over at other places as well. Nakobe Dean's obviously one of them. Reed Blankenship's going to need a contract at some point. He's going to need a big one soon. The offense is fine, but then you've got the corners starting to grow into their contract. You've just drafted another first-round linebacker. Yeah, you're not going to pay everyone. So we'll see what they do. But I think that Moro Ojomo, if he can play well this season, it's a very different type of player to Jordan Davis, but would it really be that shocking if the Eagles decide to try and move on from JD and go and build around Ojomo? I don't think it'd be that. I think we would have seen more shocking stories in Philadelphia sports history. Doug says Carter and Davis will be an amazing duo if Davis can play 40% of the snaps. I think we're in for a menacing season from JD. I think that his development has been... I keep saying the word development tonight, but it's the off-season. That's what you do, isn't it? He's just been so good and so underrated. And it might, in my opinion, be one of the most underrated players in football. Because you just look at him and you think he's slow, he's too big, he doesn't rush the passer. And I think it's genuinely just because the art of a traditional nose tackle is being lost, right? That in a three-man front, someone that can plug both gaps, can take on double teams, can stuff running lanes and allow edge rushers to eat, has been lost in favor of guys like Fletcher Cox, like Aaron Donald, that have just changed this trend over the last decade or so for pass rushing defensive tackles. And when you put him against someone like Jalen, it's the same thing with Fletch, right? Fletcher Cox, towards the end of his career, so many Eagles fans were on his back because he wasn't showing up in the stat sheet. And Aaron Donald was then ascending and getting more sacks. And against the likes of Timmy Jernigan, Jernigan was the one feasting. And then you don't realize that without Cox, BG isn't getting his, Chris Long wasn't getting his. It's the same thing here. The reason those edge rushers do so well is because of Jordan Davis and what he's able to do up front. And he opens up so much for Jalen Carter. And those two together are it's just thunder and lightning. And it's so, so exciting to watch. So I completely agree. It might well be one of the best defensive tackle duos in football. But one thing I do want to touch on, because no one's brought it up yet. No one's brought it up yet. But there was one player that stood out, wasn't there? That wasn't Tanner. Like, Tanner McKee will get his glaze at the end. All right. There was one player that stood out that has been was a draft crush of mine 2 years ago, and the Eagles selected him. And many harken back to the days of John Hightower and how that draft crush ultimately panned out to break our hearts. It wasn't Cooper. It was Aniyah Smith. And everyone's going to go, And look, I get it. But for me, it wasn't even the score. It wasn't even what he did as a receiver. It was the fact he had a kick return. He had a big kick return. And given that the Eagles have obviously lost Britton Covey, you don't want Cooper DeJean fielding punts forever because he's so, so valuable to that defense. And Smith hasn't done anything really in camp when you've got Dotson and you've got, Elijah Cooks before his heartbreaking injury. You've got Darius Cooper. Like, he has been so bad. Johnny Wilson, who I saw Duck mentioned there, he's been lost in the shuffle again. Punt return. All right, my apologies. I'm British. Put it on that. I mispronounced kick as punt or the other way around. But yeah, I think like the only thing was he looked to run out of gas about halfway up, like really run out of gas, and I was like, that could and should have been a touchdown in my opinion, and he just ran out of gas, and I'm like, oh, Aniyah, you had one job, you had one little job there, but I think we saw the first real foray into his bag of tricks, because if you go back and look at his Texas A&M tape, the big thing that I've been able to, I say able to, but like just honed in on and clutched to my chest like a small child, is that he's so good with the ball in his hands, but he overdoes it. He just overdoes it so much. And it's like, imagine if Saquon Barkley tried to hurdle someone like he did against the Jags every single time he got the ball in his hands. And that's kind of what Smith does at wide receiver. Like every time he has the ball, it's a spin or a juke or a hurdle or something to be pizzazz and turn heads, where oftentimes there'll just be a gap in front of him and he span himself out of it. And that haunted him. And if it hadn't been for that, I think he would have been a much higher draft pick. But clearly that is there. And the big thing and why that return was so important for me was he hit holes. He still started doing his fancy-wancy silly bollocks. Don't get me wrong. He was still running around like a maniac. But he hit a hole and he gained positive yardage. And that, to me, was all I needed to see. Of course, then there was the later one as well. But I hope they keep him on the roster. Something tells me they won't. Like, if you're looking at that receiver room now, it's probably going to be A.J. Brown. Johnny Wilson is your prototypical X beneath him. Devontae Smith at Z. Darius Cooper beneath him. And then Jahan Dotson in the slot, knowing you can move one of those guys in if needed in the way of, Johnny Wilson or Darius Cooper. I'd love to see them keep an extra wide out, but I think especially with the Dickerson injury, they might just bolster up on offensive linemen. It's not happening. Like, I'd love it. I love Anaya Smith. I think he's got the world of potential. He's just one of those guys that has everything and he just hasn't quite. I would liken him to Vinny Curry, right? In the way that great edge rusher needs to put the cherry on the cake. And for those first few seasons in Philadelphia, just couldn't get home to the quarterback. Couldn't get it done. Great, look, don't get me wrong, solid, sets the edge well, does what he needs to do, missing that final touch. And in the right scheme, again, there was a rumor, I said a rumor, it was a fact, but years ago, almost went to Baltimore when he was about to hit free agency, would have been 2016, I think. And I often wonder what would have happened if he'd gone there and maybe different scheme, different coaching staff, would someone have got the better out of him? I feel like Smith, to me, is perfect for like a 49er offense. Like in that gadget Debo role. Like I think he is just someone that needs the confidence in open space. I wouldn't trust him on screen passes because he's going to do so much bollocks with the ball in his hand that he's just going to get speared by a linebacker at the line of scrimmage, and that won't help anyone. I love what he could be, all right? And I heard a quote the other week. It was like, potential isn't what you see someone could be, it's what you would do in their shoes. And I know if I was Anaya Smith, I would probably be a starting receiver in the NFL because I would just cut out the silliness. But again, big punt return. It's an improvement. He's hitting holes. He's doing less. He's still doing it. And then you burn energy and you burn out, which is what happened. But it was positive. So I had to give him his mention. It wouldn't be a stream without mentioning a draft crush if they do well. We have some tough decisions to make, though, says Duck, on that wide receiver room. Wilson and Anias, Cooper all look so good. Shipley and Dillon. Will Shipley really impressed me. And that shouldn't come as a surprise. I think Will Shipley, to me, looked as good as he did in Spates last year. He's unchallenged, I think, for that backup role for Saquon. Dillon looked good. It kind of sucked weirdly to see Dillon playing preseason games that late on into proceedings because he just is a good running back. And he has been his whole career. He's been a serviceable 1A, 1B running back his entire career, put up some great numbers, put up some great moments. And I don't know, there was something almost quite sad seeing him late on. But he is just like a little bit of Jordan Howard, if you want an Eagles reference. He is a little bit of Jordan Howard. Shipley, I think, is going to be your back if they want to give Saquon a rest and still utilize the passing game with screens and swings and that sort of thing. I think that's the guy they'll go to. If it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, then it's going to be A.J. Dillon. Do I think we keep 6 receivers? No, I wish we did. I really wish we did. Just because I want Anias on the roster. I think he can bring something. But yeah, just I can't see it. I think realistically, it'll be Brown, Devontae Smith, Dotson, Wilson, Cooper. Like that. I think let's not take anything away from Darius Cooper. Because also, let's not forget, if Elijah Cooks hadn't got that injury, he would probably be ahead of Anias on the depth chart anyway. As much as I can sit here all night and yap about how much I see what could be in Anaya Smith, we can all agree it's not what's there now. What's there now is Darius Cooper, who's come storming onto the scene. What's happened there is someone, like Elijah Cooks, who burst out of nowhere, has been around the NFL for a little bit, and has then been able to just kick on and turn heads and then suffer an injury. If that didn't happen, Smith wouldn't be getting those looks, realistically. Now, again, another year maybe, working with those wideouts. Like, he just has to get his head down. He has to get his head down and out of his own arse of trying to be the next whoever. Because you're not. Like, you're Anaya Smith and you've got a very unique skill set and you're very good with the ball in your hands if you get out your own way. But I'll stop ranting about it because you're probably going to get bored of me yapping about a receiver that might not make the roster. Duck says Dotson also looked good. He did look very good. Very good. And I think, like, if I'm honest, to your comment, where he says, no one's called Howard trying to get him into the wide receiver room because he looks as solid as a wide receiver 2 anywhere and he's young. WR1 in some of the weaker teams. I think what's really worked well for the Eagles is the fact that there's so much volume between Smitty, between AJ, between Saquon, even Goddard and Calcaterra. Dotson didn't get to do much last year. But, I mean, he did on tape because he was opening space up and he allowed room for tight ends and he was fairly decent as a run blocker on those plays. But as a receiver, there's not a lot on tape to go off. And if you look at a player that was once doing pretty well at Washington, then comes to Philly and the stats go down, I don't think most scouts are looking for players that, but when he did run routes, he won them. Like, you need to see contested catches. You need to see a lot more about what he does with the ball in his hands, how he runs his routes. And he wasn't asked to do very much, which has worked great. It's worked brilliantly because the Eagles now get to keep a player that we know, if dropped in, as you say, Doug, a wide receiver 2 spot, a wide receiver 1 spot with whoever, would fare very well, would do solidly, would put up 800-900 yards maybe at a push. Okay. And because he's not being used in that way and he's being kept in the slot and almost just chained down a little bit and asked to do the dirty work, it means the Eagles can keep this player away from the spotlight, away from the headlines, away from the attention, and keep him on their roster. And it's obviously not by design. It's kind of a consequence of how they run their offense. But it's a player that will absolutely burn a defense. And all it takes, as we saw last year, is one play where someone's not quite accounting for Dotson, and the next thing you know, he's sprinting down the seam, there's not a safety in sight, and it's the easiest touchdown of your life. So having a player like that is so valuable, and especially, touch wood, it never happens, but if Devontae Smith were to ever go down, I couldn't really ask for a better backup Z receiver than Jahan Dotson. That is an incredibly fortunate spot to be in. And then you can look at, do you move Johnny Wilson to the slot? Do you move Aniyah Smith up the depth chart or whoever? So yeah, they're in a good spot with that. Nick says, I agree. Aniyah Smith runs like Willie Coyote trying to catch a road runner with the same results. Very fair. Very fair. And it breaks my heart because I can't do John Hightower again. I cannot go through another Jahan Hightower. I wish he played like Jahan Dotson. I can't do another John Hightower heartbreak. I need one draft crush receiver that the Eagles randomly take a flyer on in the 5th round because I've graded them higher than a 2nd round pick to turn out all right. Please be the difference, Aniyah. You are my only hope. I feel like Luke and Leia in the little Star Wars thing. Like, just help me, Aniyah Smith. You are my only hope. Get it sorted out. What's up, Ron? Nice to see you. Darius Cooper did look good against the Bengals and was certainly one of the bigger winners. Also, while we're talking about the receivers, Johnny Wilson, I think part of it is the rapport that he now has with Tanner McKee, because those guys were locked. They were absolutely dialed for that entire night, right? McKee would barely look anywhere. He was just so happy, so comfortable, letting his receivers just go up and make a play. And when you've got a 6'6" red zone fiend like Johnny Wilson, who can run like a slot receiver and catch like a tight end, you've got issues as a defense. And McKee is just so, it helps. A player like that helps so much with a quarterback that's already confident to let his receiver climb the rungs and get it. And no different there. No different there whatsoever. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Darius Cooper was good. I'm very keen to see how he does in these Browns practices and, of course, the Browns preseason game. Doug makes a good point. I wouldn't want to see him go to another team. 2 good showings and the team will be waiting. Also, heavy is the head that wears the crown. But as we get on to losing players to other teams, it was only a matter of time. I've tried to delay it as long as I've humanly could, okay? Let's not forget, Tanner McKee's first preseason game against Baltimore last year, I had the MLG edit go out. I've been waving the Tanner banner the whole time, all right? I am so locked in on that man's potential. And to watch that Thursday night, I don't need to say anything. I haven't got to say it. Sit here and say how great Tanner McKee was because he was that good. Everyone just looked at it and went, oh, my mic just fell out. Sorry. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not. That's not good. Sorry. I'll just go with the other one. I'll pretend this one's plugged in. We're fine. But yeah, like Tanner McKee was just better than I think anyone expected. I'm going to put the mic back in because I know that sounds like I'm in a bathroom or something. Sorry, fellas. Jesus Christ. It's riveting stuff on the stream, though, isn't it? It really, really is. It's not going in. We'll have to stomach it, I'm afraid. But yeah, Tanner McKee looked like the best backup in the NFL. Is that hyperbolic? Is that too soon, too early, too bad to say? I don't think so. I think he was absolutely exceptional. Confident, just good in the pocket, good out of the pocket. He was pressured out of the pocket a few times and just looked at ease running around. You don't hear a change in audio. Oh, after all that is infuriating. Brilliant. Never mind, Ron. Just build me up to break me down. But I agree. You could absolutely start for New York. Probably the Jets. Maybe Miami. Probably half the teams in the league, to be honest. I think, but the issue is with McKee now is that I think he's so good where we're going to hear trade offers at some point. Someone is going to try and knock on Howie's door, dial his phone, and bring out Tanner McKee, whether it's a backup or a fringe starter or a late competition to grade a rookie or whatever it is. The way he approaches football, and it was so obvious when he first came into the league, it's just the aura, for lack of a better term. And I don't want to sound like I'm 17, but he's just so happy to throw laser beams. He's got every throw you could ever want, from the little floaters to the rainbows to like the laser beams over the middle. Nothing is really out of harm's reach. Nothing is misplaced and in dangerous areas. He's smart. He's concise. A lot of velocity comes off his arm. He's good in the pocket. He can read pressures. He gets out of trouble when he needs to and can just make all the timing throws in the book. That's all I could ever need to see from Tanner McKee. And, you know, you compare that to what DTR did against debatably lesser players, and you're just looking at it thinking, all this noise through camp has been it's really close and DTR's in front and Dorian Thompson-Robinson's got experience. It doesn't matter. And I think a lot of it, honestly, is because of the bond that McKee and guys like Shipley and guys like Wilson would have been able to build over the last couple of years. I remember even against the Giants with the Smith big catch then. Same thing. You're working with these guys on the second and the third team and the scout team all week in practice. You've got to build up some kind of rapport with them. So when it comes to preseason, you trust them that little bit more. And you just really saw that. Like, this was a guy that was just so composed, so calm, never looked even remotely under pressure, broke down the huddle, which was brilliant. And unless the team is going to throw a first-round pick and a player, I'm not interested. Like, I do not care. And that sounds like it's too much. It sounds like it's extreme. Tanner McKee, for me, is... how do I say it nicely? What Nate Sudfeld should have been. That was at the beginning of the quarterback factory with Clayton Thorson. Yeah, Clayton Dawson, Nate Sudfeld, all of those guys coming through. That's what they were hoping for, is to get a guy that had the upside, that slips to the depth of the draft, that they could take a flyer on and just build him up and build him up and build him up. And look at what he's done with the opportunity. You could not ask for a better backup quarterback now than a guy that has so much skin on that bone. He has got so much meat, so much potential left to be harnessed. He won't be in Philly forever. He's going to end up on another team. He's going to end up starting. I think he's going to do very well. And, you know, is it going to coax a team out of a quarterback in this year's draft? If you're not getting one of the top names, potentially, we know it's a very QB-heavy draft, this first-round class coming up. Wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. And it'll be a sad day to see him go. But until then, keep him at all costs, give him whatever he wants. Someone buy him a nice card. Jalen, get him a new pair of shoes and a Nintendo Switch 2. Do whatever you've got to do to keep that man happy and not wanting to explore an opportunity should it come in. If it does end this season, bollocks, and sign him immediately while he's cheap. And the Eagles have done a good job of that. Even signing players before the value goes up. If you look at the Smitty and AJ contracts, if you go and look at what they did with Jordan Davis, if you look at across, I mean, even Zach Bourne was similar. They tend to pay their players earlier than most teams, and I'd like to think they do. I will double check that in a minute because I want to know when his contract expires. If it is at the end of this year, I was going to buy a Tanner McKee jersey not too long ago. Let's not forget. Oh no, he's next year, 2 years. Doug, we're all right. Right, I can buy a Tanner McKee jersey. We're fine. I can go and get one. Yeah, we've got 2 years left. We're all good. So trading it is, and no one's coming near him. I will fly to Philadelphia anyway and just headbutt anyone that comes in for him. It's not happening. We will wave the Tanner banner until the Tanner banner needs waving no more. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I've appreciated your company this evening talking about the Birds. It is so good to be back talking about the preseason and training camp. And I'm sorry again for some missed streams the last couple of weeks. Brian's been moving house, so flipping the Birds has been very much on hold temporarily. I know with myself, again, it's just been one of those periods where everything's come up. Who knew being an adult would be so busy? I miss being 19 and just streaming constantly and making videos constantly. I took that for granted, I think. What are the crowds in the YouTube chat? I don't know, because I actually can't see them, Ron. I'm guessing it could be like top commenters or something. Maybe. I've not seen them. I can't see from the platform that I'm using to stream. So I'll have a little Google and I'll let you know on Wednesday. So Wednesday, we'll be doing Jacorian Bennett tape breakdown. All right. Look in for that one, fellas. From myself, Liam Jenkins, thank you so much for hanging out. Go with thine birds, and I'll see you soon.